If you've ever been in a situation where you could feel a shift, where the connection started to fade and you couldn't pinpoint the exact moment it began, then what we're going to discuss today will change how you see every interaction from this point forward. This isn't about blame. It's not about games. And it's definitely not about trying to control another person's behavior. This is about understanding the invisible architecture of respect and how, without clear foundations, dynamics can change without anyone saying a word. The uncomfortable reality is that patterns where one person feels taken for granted don't happen by accident. They emerge, slowly, when the wrong cues are set early on. In the initial stages of building any meaningful connection, there are critical lines that determine whether you are seen as a partner of equal standing or someone whose presence becomes background noise. Miss these, and you'll find yourself months down the road, confused, overinvested, and wondering where your sense of footing went. This video is a deep dive into 5 foundational principles. These aren't tricks. They are based on understanding human psychology, self-worth, and how relational dynamics form. Most advice out there teaches you how to react to problems. What we're going to cover is how to build a position so solid that you rarely have to. The key isn't just confidence or charm, it's structure. And structure is built through conscious, consistent action. If you're ready to move from guessing to understanding, make sure you're subscribed and have notifications on. We're going deep today, and you won't want to miss any part of this breakdown. This shift begins with the very first principle most people overlook. Let's begin. Before we get into the first principle, if this topic resonates with you, hit the like button. It helps this content reach others who need to hear it. Now, let's break this open. Principle 1. The premature provider frame. The first principle revolves around a classic misunderstanding: confusing transparency with premature disclosure, specifically in the realm of resources. There's a common belief that openness equals trust, and that sharing details of your life, including your financial landscape, is a fast track to bonding. But here's the psychological shift that occurs, one that most people are entirely unaware of. When you reveal certain types of information too early, particularly information related to your capacity to provide or your material stability, you aren't building emotional intimacy. You are, often unintentionally, initiating an evaluation. The moment you talk about your income, investments, major purchases, or financial goals in the initial phases, a subtle but significant reframe happens. You stop being a person she is getting to know on a human level and start becoming a set of data points she is assessing. This isn't about someone being calculating in a negative sense. It's a natural, often subconscious, psychological process. She hasn't yet formed a deep emotional bond or committed to the relationship, but you have already placed yourself in a position of being measured for your utility. I call this the premature provider frame. You are, effectively, auditioning for a role that hasn't been defined, and the dangerous part is you usually don't even know the audition is happening. You might mention your salary casually in a story. You might joke about a year-end bonus. You might talk about the cost of your car or the expensive trip you're planning. In your mind, you're just sharing your life. But on the other side, a quiet assessment begins: stability, capacity, access. When this frame takes hold, something fundamental changes. The attraction stops being primarily emotional and curiosity-based and starts to incorporate a layer of practical evaluation. Here's the hard truth. Once a person begins evaluating your utility, it becomes harder for them to feel you. The sense of mystery and discovery diminishes. Natural tension turns into expectation. And this shift doesn't require them to ask you for anything. It simply requires them to observe how freely you offer this information, how eager you are to signal stability as your primary value, how quickly you turn your external achievements into proof of your worth. People do this because we've been taught, especially in certain cultures, that being a provider is synonymous with being valuable. But early on, leading with provision doesn't create attraction. It can actually replace it. You are no longer the intriguing person they want to explore. You become the person they are subconsciously figuring out how to fit into their life plan. That's why this boundary matters so much at the start, because once the frame changes, it's incredibly difficult to reset. You can't talk your way back into mystery. This becomes especially critical when problems arise. If she mentions financial stress, a costly car repair, or a tight month, and you immediately step in with solutions or offers to help before a committed partnership exists, a critical shift occurs that is not in your favor. You don't become her partner, you become her support system. This is a role downgrade that most never see coming. The moment you say, "I've got you," or "let me handle that," prior to mutual commitment, you silently volunteer for responsibility without authority. You give provision without a clear position. And from this point, the dynamic can harden. She may feel appreciation, but appreciation is not the same as desire. Gratitude is not attraction. The tests may begin, subtle mentions of problems, watching to see if you feel compelled to rescue. This isn't necessarily manipulation. It's a natural probe of the boundaries you've set. Most fail here because they confuse generosity with leadership. They rush in, thinking it proves their value. In reality, it often proves predictability. And predictable patterns are easy to place into utility boxes. The correct application of this principle doesn't require speeches or defensiveness. You don't need to justify why you won't pay a bill. It's about staying calm, grounded, and emotionally neutral. You can be supportive without entangling yourself. A simple, empathetic, but firm response that doesn't cross the line into taking ownership of the problem. And here's what surprises many. A person who is genuinely interested in you will often respect this boundary immediately. Not because they wanted to test you, but because they feel safer with someone who has a clear sense of their own structure. Someone with unclear intentions may feel irritated or pull back. That isn't a loss. That's filtration. This principle doesn't push good people away. It filters out those who were only there for what you could represent, not who you are. True relational leadership begins where access is consciously controlled, not freely given. If what you're hearing is making sense, take a second to comment below with structure. I want to hear from you. Let's keep going. Principle 2, the tolerance threshold. The second principle addresses a silent killer of respect, the tolerance of subtle disrespect. Most people imagine disrespect as loud, obvious, and confrontational, raised voices, insults, clear hostility. Because they're looking for that, they miss it when it truly matters, because real erosion often begins quietly. Disrespect, in its most damaging form, doesn't announce itself. It sneaks in through the cracks of casual interaction and waits to see if you'll notice, if you'll stop it. It shows up in the micro behaviors. When she consistently interrupts you mid-sentence and doesn't acknowledge it. When she makes a passive-aggressive or belittling joke at your expense and follows it with "relax, I'm just kidding." When she casually compares you to an ex-partner. When your time and communication are treated as low priority, but hers are expected to be your top priority. None of these moments feel big enough to warrant a confrontation in the moment. You tell yourself you're being easygoing, that it's not a big deal, that you don't want to seem sensitive. And that's exactly why these behaviors work. From a psychological standpoint, this isn't usually about cruelty. It's a form of evaluation, a test of the environment. The silent question being asked is, what can I get away with here? People test boundaries the way water tests a dam, with steady, incremental pressure. If there is no resistance, the pressure naturally increases. If a small breach is tolerated, a larger one will follow. Let's paint a common scenario. You're out with her and a group of friends. The mood is light. Everyone is laughing. Someone asks how the two of you are doing. She smirks and says something like, "Oh, he's all right," when he's not being totally clueless anyway. The friends laugh. She laughs. You feel a sting but force a smile, telling yourself it's harmless teasing, that she didn't mean it, that you'd look insecure if you objected. But something significant just happened. Your status was subtly lowered in a social setting. You were used as a source of casual entertainment at your own expense. And most importantly, she, and everyone present, watch what you did next. These tests are rarely about the content of the comment. They are about your response, or your lack of one. When you let it slide, you are not broadcasting calm maturity. You are signaling that your self-respect is negotiable. You are communicating that maintaining immediate comfort is more important to you than maintaining your personal standards. And once someone internalizes that they can step over a line without any consequence, they will. Not necessarily from a place of malice, but because you have shown them, through your inaction, that the line does not exist. Silence, in these moments, is not composure. Silence is read as consent. This is the critical mistake, believing that not reacting makes you look strong and unbothered. In reality, What you're communicating is much simpler and more damaging. This behavior is allowed. When you don't respond to subtle disrespect, you don't freeze the moment, you set a precedent. And precedents compound. One small pass turns into another, then another, until the entire dynamic has shifted so gradually that correcting it feels like a monumental, confusing task. There's a social chain reaction here that most never anticipate. When disrespect happens publicly and is tolerated, the social circle notices. They don't see you as the chill, easygoing guy. They begin to see you as the person who doesn't stand up for themselves. Their perception shifts first, and then, often unconsciously, hers follows. Because once she sees that you will tolerate being diminished in front of others, she learns she can do it in private, too. The tone of the relationship changes. Effort drops. Attraction erodes. Not in a day, but permanently. Implementing this principle isn't about dramatic confrontations, anger, or retaliatory sarcasm. It's not about embarrassing her back. High-value behavior is about responding immediately, calmly, and directly. It's a clear, non-negotiable signal. This could be a brief, direct statement said with calm conviction. It's not an emotional charge. It's a boundary being communicated. That response does something powerful. It resets the frame in real time. It tells her, and everyone present, that you respect yourself enough to draw a line the moment it is crossed. This isn't about controlling her behavior. It's about enforcing your own standards. Because respect is not negotiated through endless patience. It's not earned by simply enduring poor treatment. It is enforced through consistent action. We're halfway through these foundational principles. If you're finding value, please share this video with a friend who might need to hear it. Let's continue. Principle 3. The currency of time. The third principle is where many people sabotage the potential of a connection before it even has a chance to root itself. It concerns the currency of your time. You meet someone you're excited about. The chemistry is good. The attention is flattering. And because you don't want to lose momentum or seem disinterested, you begin a subtle but destructive pattern. You make your time too freely available. You think constant availability shows high interest. You think saying yes to every spontaneous plan proves your enthusiasm. You think rearranging your schedule, canceling on friends, or skipping your gym session to see her makes you look invested and attentive. From her perspective, however, it can look very different. When you are always available, it doesn't signal deep desire. It can signal a lack of internal structure. People don't evaluate you in a vacuum. They evaluate the life that surrounds you. The subconscious question being asked isn't just, does he like me? It's, does this person have a life of their own that can healthily incorporate me without collapsing? When your schedule becomes a reactive, open calendar based on her whims, she doesn't feel uniquely chosen. She feels prioritized at the expense of everything else in your world. Paradoxically, this lowers attraction. The common belief is that scarcity alone is attractive. The deeper truth is that the absence of a purposeful structure is unattractive. A person who drops everything the moment you appear doesn't look committed. They look unanchored. And trust is difficult to build with someone who appears to have nothing anchoring them. This principle is not about playing hard to get, a manipulative game of fake busyness. It's about the authentic protection of your life's foundation. Your time is the one non-renewable resource you have. When you treat it as cheap or infinitely available, you unconsciously communicate that your own life lacks value and direction. A person who treats their time with respect, like a valuable currency, is inherently more attractive. Not because they are busy, but because their life has momentum and intention before the other person enters the picture. Protecting your schedule does something powerful in the other person's mind. It shifts their perception. They stop seeing you as an option they can summon at will and start seeing you as someone they need to meet halfway, to coordinate with, to value the time of. Time creates anticipation when it is not available on demand. Most misunderstand this. They think saying no to a last-minute date will kill the spark. In reality, it can sharpen it. When you don't jump at every opportunity for contact, you signal self-control, and self-control is a cornerstone of maturity and strength. Here's the practical application. She texts late on a weeknight, wanting to see you spontaneously. You have an early morning commitment, a workout planned, or simply value your wind-down time. The insecure move is to abandon your plans and rush over, hoping your eagerness proves your interest. The grounded move is different. You respond warmly but firmly. This response accomplishes two things simultaneously. It demonstrates that your time matters and that your commitments to yourself are real. It also makes the time you do spend together feel intentional, chosen, and valuable, not just a default, convenient option. The crucial distinction here is this: being busy is not inherently attractive. Having purpose is. A person with purpose doesn't need to fabricate scarcity. Their schedule naturally reflects their priorities. That sense of a life in motion is palpable. When your time is protected and purposeful, attraction has the space to breathe and grow. When your time is unlimited and unstructured, attraction can suffocate under the weight of constant presence. You don't build a strong connection by being constantly available. You build it by being consistently grounded in your own life. Has there been a time when being too available backfired for you? Share your experience in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. Principle 4. The emotional architecture. The fourth principle is one of the most seductive traps because it wears the disguise of deep intimacy. It involves becoming an emotional dumping ground before a committed partnership is formed. Early on, she opens up about deep traumas, chaotic ex-partners, family drama, and past hurts. She might cry, share her fears, and tell you she's never felt so understood. It feels incredibly intimate. It feels special. You think, this means we have a deep connection. I'm different from the others. But it's critical to distinguish between mutual, paced vulnerability and one-sided emotional dumping. Emotional dumping is not intimacy. It is often a form of recruitment or unconscious testing. What's happening is simple. She is gauging how much emotional labor you are willing to perform before she has offered real investment or commitment in return. And most people volunteer for this duty without seeing the long-term cost. You listen for hours. You offer reassurance and advice. You become her steady rock, her safe harbor in her emotional storms. You become reliable, empathetic, and safe. And slowly, quietly, the frame shifts. You are no longer the partner she feels excitement and desire for. You become the person she uses to stabilize herself. The emotional therapist. Here's the painful part. People mistake this early emotional access for emotional bonding. They think, she trusts me so much. What they fail to see is that trust without mutual investment and attraction does not create romantic desire. It can create utility. She may lean on you heavily for emotional support, then turn around and channel her excitement, flirtation, and sense of adventure towards someone else who hasn't occupied this therapist role. It's not because you did anything wrong by being kind. It's because you stepped into a role that often exists outside the realm of romantic polarity. The dynamic of masculine-feminine polarity, or simply romantic tension, often dissipates the moment one person becomes the other's primary emotional container too early. Mystery fades. Tension flattens. Desire can become muted. And once you are categorized emotionally as the safe one, it is remarkably difficult to shift that perception. This boundary is not about being cold, closed off, or unempathetic. It is about consciously pacing intimacy. When you carry someone's full emotional weight before they have chosen you as a committed partner, you are giving away significant leverage. Emotional closeness is powerful currency in a relationship, but like any currency, it loses value when it is given away too freely and too soon, without requiring reciprocal investment. The key distinction is this: you can be present without becoming responsible. You can listen empathetically without taking ownership of her emotional state. You can care without allowing her emotional storms to dictate your own peace, schedule, or identity. The mistake isn't having empathy. The mistake is overextension, rushing to fix, solve, and absorb problems that belong to her journey. Healthy emotional pacing looks different. You listen. You acknowledge her feelings. You stay grounded and calm. But you do not dive headfirst into problem-solving mode every time. You do not become the 24/7 crisis hotline. You do not allow her lack of emotional regulation to become your constant responsibility. This boundary protects the polarity necessary for sustained attraction. Polarity thrives on tension, mutual effort, and space. It diminishes when one person becomes the sole emotional anchor while the other remains free to experience all other emotions elsewhere. People often fear that holding this boundary makes them seem uncaring. In reality, it creates a cleaner, healthier connection. It invites reciprocity. It gives her the opportunity to step forward and engage with you emotionally, rather than simply leaning back into your support. A person forms a deep bond with someone they invest in emotionally, not necessarily with the person who carries their emotional weight for free. When she has to show up, regulate herself, and contribute to the emotional fabric of the connection, attraction deepens naturally. This principle doesn't block true intimacy. It preserves the conditions for it, because intimacy that isn't mutually built doesn't foster desire. It can foster dependence. And dependence is the opposite of attraction. Principle 5, the panic paradox. The fifth and final principle is the moment where many undo all the positive groundwork they've laid. That it's the panic paradox. Everything seems to be going well. The energy is mutual, the connection feels strong. Then, a shift occurs. She begins to pull back. Her communication becomes less frequent, less warm. The effort seems to drop. This is the critical juncture. The instinctive reaction for most is panic. You feel the distance growing and your mind races. What did I do wrong? Is she stressed? Is there someone else? This panic, driven by fear of loss, leads to a series of behaviors that are almost guaranteed to cement the decline in attraction. It typically unfolds in three predictable, self-sabotaging steps. 1. You fill the silence. She creates space, and you rush to fill it with more messages, more check-ins, more communication. The subtext is clear. I am uncomfortable without your constant attention. 2. You try to reassure her. In yourself, you offer increased emotional availability, declaring your support and presence. Every word, while intended to be comforting, can subtly communicate anxiety and fear. Fear of losing her, fear of the connection fading. 3. You overcompensate. You plan more elaborate dates, give more compliments, increase your gifts or favors. You turn your effort volume all the way up, hoping that sheer force of attention will close the gap she created. From a dynamics perspective, the moment you increase your effort in direct response to her withdrawal, the power balance shifts decisively. She holds the frame, you are now chasing it. You are training her that she can reduce her investment, and your response will be to increase yours. Once this pattern locks in, genuine desire suffocates. It's impossible for someone to miss you, to feel your absence, if you are constantly trying to eliminate any space. Pulling back is not always a conscious test. Sometimes it's a person processing their own feelings. Sometimes interest is genuinely fading. Sometimes life simply gets in the way. But reacting with panic turns all these possibilities into the same negative outcome: a loss of your own footing, a loss of attraction, and a loss of self-respect. Here is the paradoxical truth that many resist. Attraction rarely returns because you try harder. It often returns when there is respectful space. You were likely taught that effort solves problems, that persistence proves your worth. But romantic attraction operates on a different frequency. It responds to absence, mystery, and self-contained wholeness. When you consciously choose not to reward distance with increased pursuit, one of two things will happen, and both ultimately work in your favor. 1. If her interest was genuine, but she was pulling back for other reasons or testing, she will recalibrate. She will notice the space you've held. The imbalance will often correct itself naturally. Her effort will rise to meet the level of yours, because consistency now requires her to step forward. 2. If she does not re-engage, then the truth is revealed sooner rather than later. Your boundary did not cause the loss. It simply illuminated a reality that was already forming. You stopped investing in a connection that was not being reciprocated. This is the emotional hurdle, the belief that if I pull back, I will lose her. The reframe is this: if I have to abandon myself to keep her, I have already lost. By holding your ground, you stop chasing an illusion and start living in reality. Never reward withdrawal with pursuit. Pursuit in the face of withdrawal trains the other person that they can have your attention without giving their own. Absence, held with grace and strength, does what desperate effort never can. It restores balance. It returns agency to your side of the equation. It reminds her that access to you, your peace, and your attention is a privilege, not a guarantee. This is the quiet power of the final principle. It doesn't seek to manipulate an outcome. It seeks to clarify it. It allows you to see clearly whether you are in a mutual connection or a one-sided chase. You don't lose by enforcing this boundary. You win back your self-respect, and clarity. What we've walked through today is not a bag of manipulative tricks or pickup artist tactics. That IT is a system, a framework for understanding the invisible structures that govern respect and attraction. These 5 principles are about one fundamental purpose: protecting your own value and wholeness before anyone else has the chance to define it for you. This is about building a life and an identity so solid that you enter relationships from a place of choice, not need. It's about understanding that the healthiest dynamics are formed between two complete people, not two halves searching for completion. These boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are gates that you consciously control, ensuring that those who enter your life do so with respect and mutual intent. They are about leading your own life with such conviction that the right person is inspired to walk beside you, not in front of you or behind you. If this resonated with you, if you saw patterns you want to change, then your journey starts with a decision. The decision to value yourself enough to build that structure. Your engagement means everything. If this video added value to your life, do 3 things for me. 1. Smash that like button. It tells the algorithm this content matters. 2. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We go deep like this every week, and I don't want you to miss it. 3. Comment below. Let me know which of these 5 principles hit home the most. Share your thoughts or questions. And finally, share this with a friend, a brother, someone you care about who might be struggling with these patterns. Let's build a community focused on growth and self-respect. Thank you for watching. This is about your journey. Lead yourself well, and everything else will follow. I'll see you in the next video.